So I'd like to welcome our viewers, our audience, the subscribers to my Monday Simple Wisdom email list to what I kind of call a series I've been that's been unfolding, called Coffee with the Creator and the Mentor. One of the things I enjoyed, that meditation time, that quiet time that I describe in my book, Finding Flow, that's so important. Just to make it informal, I often refer to it, and many people do too, is having coffee with the Creator. And so from time to time, I'd like to introduce to the audience some of the mentors that through God nudges in my life I've met. They say when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. And so in that community part of divine flow, the quiet time, the spiritual reading, the community, the spiritual gifts, it's important to recognize that God sometimes puts different teachers, mentors in our lives. And sometimes they're God nudges. And so today, I'd like to introduce you to Coffee with the Creator and Cam. I'll introduce him a little bit. Thank you for being with us, Cam. I really appreciate it. I met Cam again through a God nudge about a year ago. I was on a silent retreat at the Abbey Gethsemane, and unfortunately, had brought my phone with me, so I was doing social media. I was checking in on Instagram, and I was going through some tough times in my life, just a spiritual problem with just some, family issues, the death of my father-in-law, a professional issue, a betrayal of a business associate of mine, and just trying to, where's God in all this? And I bumped across this social media post on Instagram that Cam had posted about the ego death. And it was like one of those light bulbs is, oh my God, that's what I'm going through. So I go down rabbit holes a lot of time, like, okay, God, and so after the retreat, I reached out to Cam, and actually for a year now, Cam has been a guide, a mentor. We've done a lot of one-on-one sessions with him as a coach, in addition to my own spiritual director. And so I've just found a lot of awakening from Cam, and we'll talk about that. And so I just thought I'd introduce my audience to Cam and some of the cool events that he's got going. By a quick way of background, on Cam's website, Awakenpedia.com, Cam describes himself as the surrendered creator of the modern spiritual platform and holistic health community called Awakenpedia. That was a term too that really, Awakenpedia. Wow, I really like that. What is that? We'll talk more about what that is. Awakenpedia, according to the website, is one of the fastest growing, totally free international awakening communities with members and partners from all around the world. Awakenpedia is run as a global nonprofit with the primary mission of saving the world by facilitating its awakening. I just love that. I mean, that's a big task that each one of us is part of. And it's like, wow, that's huge, and that's cool. So to dive in, just let me ask you, Cam, what do you mean by that concept awakening? And what was your own awakening journey? Just dive in there and let us know. Yeah, what's stirring in you?
Sure. And first, let me say thank you, Brian, for having me and for the introduction, and for sharing the way in which that we came into each other's lives, and the beautiful friendship and relationship that's been blossoming as a result. It's been a joy to learn from you as well, and we often learn through our teaching. So it's always a two-way street.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, awakening, it's perhaps the hardest thing to define in this world, because it really is definitionless in many ways. Yet we have to attempt to describe what's going on here. And we do that through concepts, through language. But awakening to me, in many ways, as the name implies, is the waking from the dream that so many of us are still currently snoring in today. You can call it the dream of the ego, just a dream in general that, it only really happens when you're sleeping. But the point of it is to say that the reality that you think is true is actually false. It's an illusion. And when you wake up, you rise out of that illusion, or many say you see beyond the veil,
Mm,
and you get a glimpse of what true reality is.
mm,
Many describe that as the essence of enlightenment, which is often synonymous with the awakened state of being.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And so awakening is that process. It's often the journey. The paradox, of course, is that the journey is the destination, which brings us to the here and now. Um, and so that's why it's so hard to grasp this, because it's so often paradoxical.
mm,
Um, but the awakening journey is this process of rising out of the egoic dream, out of illusion, and coming into a more true state of vision, of seeing what is, as opposed to seeing the through the conditioned mind, which is what we do when we're in the dream. We're seeing through our experiences, our traumas,
mm,
all of the things that have been hardened into us that bias reality and
mm,
make it a subjective experience. And so we get lost, and um, we don't know it often,
mm,
that we're lost.
mm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
um, that's the part about the dream that often is so confusing, because you don't know you're dreaming until you wake up,
Mm.
right?
Ah,
And that's why awakening, when you really do wake up, is so profound, because it shifts the way in which you see reality completely. It is an absolute 180-degree shift that inverts perception, so that now you see things as they are, which is to say, you see from the seat of God,
mm,
perhaps, as
mhm,
opposed to seeing from the seat of the ego.
mm.
So I'll pause there, because I
Yeah,
can ramble, but that's perhaps
yeah,
a way of describing what's happening when we're awakening. And it's
sure.
really an ascension of consciousness. It's an ascension of awareness, because more and more awareness is coming into our life and our mind. And we're no longer getting caught up and lost in this dream. We're rising out of it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the terms I've learned from you when you talk about ego is the ego self is the mind-made self. I turned 65, and when I went through my own ego death, which, as you teach, there's a number of those ego deaths. I thought to myself, it's kind of like the onion skin that each one of us, as we grow up, we think think I'm a lawyer, I think I'm a father, I'm a husband, which is all true, but I think that's my identity, and it's like I just live on this physical plane of who I think I am. But what I've learned from you is that awakening is no, that's not who I am. It's what I do. The awakening is to the divine self within us, the God within us. In the Christian tradition, we would say the Holy Spirit that is moving within us, guiding us. So it's awakening, from, at least for me, was that sense of moving from who I thought I was, and as those wheels came off my wagon, to wow, discovering who I really am. The onion skins start coming off. And I began to see even more deeply who God is in me, who God is in others. It was awakening to more of that. You might even say that the deeper realm, the divine realm, that leads and guides us. Yeah, yeah. What was your awakening journey? I mean, you've got an amazing story. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what faith tradition, what led you to this, your own awakening, which is obviously a lifelong thing for all of us. But yeah, tell us your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for bringing that up, that point about the Holy Spirit too, because I'm an avid fan of a little spiritual text called A Course in Miracles,
Mm,
and they often, in that text, it's the Holy Spirit is often referenced, and I'm full alignment with that notion that awakening. Another way to describe it would be waking up to the presence of the Holy Spirit that indwells within,
mm,
that's always there, always connected with you as a part of you, that connects you to God, the creator. But in the sleeping state, you're simply unaware, or rather disconnected from the Holy Spirit. And
mm,
so you're only listening to that ego voice, as opposed to being able to hear the more true inner voice, which is communicated through that connection with the Holy Spirit.
very.
Um, and that is what leads you back to God, when you can actually hear it, listen to it, and follow it.
Mhm.
So just another way to describe the awakening journey. There are
Mhm.
infinite number of ways to describe it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But my journey, I'll try to keep this short, Brian, if I can, because it really is one that can go on for hours. And I do have a video on my Patreon platform that people could check out if they're interested. That is the longer version of my story. It's like an hour and a half that just kind of talk
Okay.
about what happened in my life, if people
Sure.
are interested. But the synopsis of this is that I grew up largely what I would describe as a classic materialist, um, i.e., without much faith. I actually was grown, like I was brought into a Christian household. I had Christian values. We went to church from time to time. Um, celebrated Christmas. It was very much plugged into that jet stream. So if there's any faith that I was ascribed, it was Christian. It just wasn't really a big part of my life or childhood. My parents weren't really too much of faith themselves. Their faith was more so money and materials and the physical world, which is the case for so many, particularly in the West. Um,
Mhm.
so, as a result of that conditioning and those values being instilled in me, I very much grew up believing that my happiness, fulfillment, salvation would be found through wealth, material wealth,
Mhm.
through material acquisition, accumulation, and achievement. Um, and I like to say that I was actually very good at it. I was a great ego player. I did all the right things. I worked incredibly hard. I got great grades, right? Did all the things I was supposed to do. Uh, Played sports at a super high level and got recruited to play at Yale soccer.
Mm.
And went to Yale, graduated top of my class, straight into private equity. Was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, had all the toys, all the pleasures, um, a hedonist dream, if you will. And yet, the more I seemed to do and achieve, the more empty I felt. It was so strange to me because, according to the world, I was doing everything right that was supposed to make me feel amazing, to bring me the happiness. And so it was through essentially a couple of decades of constant disillusionment, of things not proving to be true, not working out in the sense of providing me with the peace that they promised.
Mm.
That ultimately I just led to significant suffering because I was like, why is it not working? Like, why am I not happy? Why am I not at peace? Like, I have everything that the world said would make me happy.
Mm.
Um, and so the suffering was there and the suffering continued. And the more I achieved, the more the suffering grew because the less it actually fulfilled me. And, certain things happened in my life as well that added to the disillusionment and the frustration and the jadedness with life, perhaps in that way, and the confusion.
Mm.
Um, example, my father, he actually committed suicide when I was young. I was 13. So that was one of the early things in life to happen that kind of rocked my world, rocked that faith in the material world having my answers. So I was exposed to death early on, and things happened. Got fired from a job. Had to move suddenly out of my apartment. Got cheated on, which completely blew up my ego. Uh, Meaning, in this sense, actually, it made it grow. It blossomed it, ballooned it, because I was like, "You cheated on me. This is like." I
Good
did nothing
girlfriend, huh?
wrong. Like, how could you cheat on me? And it just fed that ego, that mind-made self of that had all of these opinions on how the world should be, how my life should be. And so, all of that suffering led to me numbing myself, that urge to numb myself with addiction, ultimately, what grew into addiction to alcohol, booze, porn, various other substances and activities, things that I used as escapes, ways to deal with the growing dissonance that something wasn't right and I didn't know what. Anyway, fast forwarding a bit, all of that just continued, that suffering continued to fester and grow until the point of summer of 2020, when I had my ego death. And it was the most profound shift in consciousness that is beyond words. But it aligned with what I call the dark night of the soul, the time in which suffering peaks in its intensity. And that time is often what correlates so much with suicide, because you're on the edge and you don't know, it feels as if it can't get any worse. You don't know what to do, where to turn, nothing's working. You're absolutely miserable. You're completely lost. And so, your options at that point, which were my options, were to either end my life, because you feel in that moment that will end your suffering. Of course, we now know that won't. But it was either that or to completely surrender and accept my situation, accept where I was. And for whatever reason, I was blessed by God to not give up on this incarnation, on this life, and instead to surrender, to let go of that control, of having to control my life, to completely give in, to give over my will, and to step into God's will, to receive access to that divinity that at that time I did not know even existed. I wasn't aware of it. But simply by surrendering, truly surrendering, letting go, and opening up the doors to invite the divine essence in, or what you could call the Holy Spirit, for the first time I was able to hear it. And that was the beginning of everything. It was, I think, 2 days after that, essentially, that I quit my job in private equity overnight. It was, and I didn't even know I was going to quit. I just woke up in the morning, went into the morning meeting, and came out of that morning meeting jobless. And I can't tell you how massive of a relief it felt for me to actually be able to let go of those mental chains and to step into the unknown. Because after I quit my job, I got in the Jeep and I drove south aimlessly. I felt this call, though. It was a deep rooted calling to just explore, to step into the unknown, truly, to abandon all safeties and securities and, familiarities. And I just drove, and I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, why I was doing it, but I just trusted. I stepped into what I now know was faith. And that's a function of trust, of knowing without knowing. And I did that for that began the nomadic portion of this life journey of mine that's still ongoing to this day, 3 years later. And it was through that process of nomadic exploration that I just became flooded with divine insight. It's the only way I can describe it. And what I now know, though, is what that means is that I was starting to see things in the awakened state from beyond the mind, beyond the conditioned mind, beyond the ego. I was waking from the dream. And, that staying in that state of surrendered unknown for undefined period of time, I just continued to receive intuition, insight, that was from beyond myself. And for many months, I just was collecting insight, just being. I did nothing. I was meditating in random forests. I was journaling and reading. Those were my days. I meditated, I journaled, and I read. And I did that, I don't even know for how many months, many months. And I actually had no anticipation or expectation of that ever stopping. I just was there being, and I knew that it felt so incredibly brilliant and euphoric to be so deeply connected with God, with this divine essence, that I didn't want to leave that state. But I also knew deep down that there was some type of underlying current that was pulling me back into the world, and I would be at some point, to fulfill my divine function as a co-creator and to therefore participate in the world. And that ultimately is what led to the birthing of Awakenpedia. And it would be remiss of me, Brian, not to mention this as well as part of this journey, because it really is so cataclysmic in terms of the catalyzation of this all, in terms of the actual channeling portion of this. But I was in Charleston. This was now right 2 days before Awakenpedia, what I call, began. I was driving on my nomad journey, and I was passing a church, actually, late at night. It was a perfectly clear night, right? No clouds, nothing. It was a perfectly clear fall night. And I passed this church, and this church is engulfed by a cloud, absolutely engulfed by a singular cloud, the only cloud I could witness in the entire sky anywhere. Wow. And I thought it was the strangest thing, right? I mean, how could you not? But I also felt this incredibly deep pull to pull over, to get out of my car and to go frolic and dance in this cloud.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and so I do. I trust, and I surrender, and I'm not thinking. I'm just being, and the being is informing my doing. And so I dance through this cloud. What I feel is like I absorb this cloud, and then I just get back in my car and I drive back to my hotel. And out of nowhere, I come into deep, hot fever, like 102. And it's so strange because I wasn't sick. There's nothing going on before that. And I actually was to the point where I was like, oh man, do I need some medical emergency help? Because it was so strange. But I decided again just to trust this, and I surrendered and I went to bed. 2 days later, I started the writing portion of Awakenpedia. Over that next month, I had written over 150,000 words, none of which I can actually even remember. But it all points to that there's this profound transformation occurring within me. And I knew in that moment that I was being called to serve and to be of use for God's will. And the rest is history, really. That was the beginning. I just was channeling these teachings I shared online. I called it Awakenpedia. The name came to me. And it's had since evolved into what now is a such larger, comprehensive platform with writings, audios, videos, events, services, retreats, all with the unified mission to facilitate the awakening of humanity, to restore us back to love, to rise out of fear, and to come back into the oneness of the I am that we all are.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Cam. I just, wow, that's amazing journey. As you share your journey, each one of us, I think, in our lives have awakenings like that, moments of maybe not quite as big as you did, but certainly those moments. It reminds me in many ways of our two most enlightened historical features or individuals is Buddha, who is disillusioned with his privileged life and and literally says, I'm going to go sit underneath the lotus tree, until he began to receive that insight, that wisdom to move into that deeper consciousness of the divine reality. But also Jesus. I mean, Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And many would say, because he was trying to understand, where is God calling me? What is my mission in life? I mean, one of my pastors once said that Jesus went into the desert shortly after he changed the water into wine. When Mary nudged him to do that, he says, I'm not ready. but he was like, so, oh my gosh, God's given me this amazing grace to do this. And so he goes into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, really to be alone with God, like you did, become a nomad, basically, to really receive, those images, those messages from God, and then leaves, the desert eventually and starts calling men and women to follow him. And, we know the rest of the story. So, I mean, there's many parallels in there. And I love that you share that, because we all have those moments, mine being the ego death, but years ago, I, had an instance at a retreat 30 years ago that was an awakening for me. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for, you could have just said, oh, I'm just gonna sit here on my, on my pillow and just meditate for the rest of my life and eat potato chips and write, but but you felt that and you trusted that. That's the beauty. You trusted that. I've heard people say, I know that I know that I know that something beyond me that's also within me is drawing me to something deeper. And you trusted that and you moved into that. So you tell me a little bit more about what is you already kind of said what the purpose of Awakenpedia is, but yeah, awakening to the divine essence of love, the God, that deeper realm of getting out of just our one track mind of the secular world, or but also learning to live in the world. Tell me what do you think? What do you sense is the call of Awakenpedia for people like me and our audience that are just like trying to figure it all out?
Mm, mm.
What is
Yeah,
that awakening of the world, if you had to put it in a nutshell?
sure, sure. Um, well, the truest expression I could use to kind of point to what the purpose of Awakenpedia is, just to solidify that, is is just serving God's will. I really want to emphasize that, because everything else outside is just words, and it can confuse people, and there's language, as we'll get into, that can be confusing and misleading, and
Right.
so I this is just in service of God.
Yeah.
That's the purest thing. Um, and I know that. I do know that.
Mhm.
Um, through and through.
Yeah.
Now, there's practical applications for what this can help, and from a worldly perspective, which is a part of its aim and intention as well. Um, but ultimately, that's secondary to the awakening, global awakening that's happening here. That is, many describe and point to as the second coming of Jesus, um, and I feel aligned with that as well, personally, just as in terms of how I've come into it intuitively. But uh, when we facilitate the awakening journey for ourselves at the individual level, and then when enough of us are able to shift that vibration, that energy, the consciousness, to align more with divine love rather than egoic fear, it is it's going to have global impact on how, everything from how we live our lives to organization and business relationship. Nothing will be left unturned, unaffected by this movement, what's happening right now. And so we're facilitating that process, that awakening process, and in doing so, I've said this too in many ways from the beginning, from a practical perspective. I sense that awakening, uh, following God's will, coming back into love, uh, will solve and treat so many of the plagues that our globe is currently experiencing, from suicide to addiction to overdose to the larger mental health crisis that we have all these various names for, in terms of things from depression, anxiety. All of it could be surmised to say that when you're experiencing any type of unpeace, lack of peace, fear, you're disconnected from God, disconnected from love.
Mhm.
And that manifests as dysfunction, which we then label as depression, anxiety, these various things. But I do know intuitively that, um, my dad the ego is what took his life,
Mm.
his own mind. He could not escape his mind-made self. It tortured him and consumed him. And that is what's happening so much around the world. It's why we're seeing increased rates of mental illness. People are becoming increasingly disconnected from their essence, the one essence. And I know that awakening to rise out of the ego and to start seeing from God's vision, true vision, the vision of what is from the seat of love, again, many names, right?
Yeah.
That will allow us to it's the only thing that truly will allow us to rise out of the suffering state, so that life no longer is perceived as a burden and a struggle, but instead it's something that is actually of peace and that we can enjoy.
Yeah.
And I speak from my own direct experience as someone who was on that ledge myself,
Sure.
and someone that, has family that made one decision to go off the ledge, and me being someone who didn't.
Mm.
I have such an intimate, intuitive understanding of those dynamics. So, the ego, the mind-made self, is when we get caught, we trip up. That's when we're suffering, when
Yeah.
we're identified with our thought forms, with the mind. That is when we are. Another way of saying is trying to impose our own will as opposed to God's will, serving God in
Mm.
that way. And that's when we suffer, and that's when life becomes miserable and challenging, and we're lost and confused. And that's what leads to the decision ultimately to end your own life, because you're not aware of God's will. No one has ever taken their life, no one's ever committed suicide out of joy.
Yeah.
And God, coming into the awareness of God, connectedness with God, only brings love and joy. And so
Yeah. Makes sense.
so that's a long-winded way of saying the purpose of Awakenpedia, of course, is to facilitate the awakening journey, to return us to love, to return us to God, our creator. But on a practical level, it also is to transform all of the plagues that our world is experiencing.
Mhm.
And yeah, so massive mission, but that's also why this is not about me. It's not about Awakenpedia. It's not Awakenpedia and myself are simply vehicles to serve this one mission that we all share, whether
Yeah.
we know it or not.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, and it's why, like, so much of Awakenpedia is about partnership and bringing as many people into this as possible to help,
Sure.
shift the collective.
Yeah. What rises up with me, Cam, is something my teachers have taught me that over the years that we're made up of mind, body, and spirit. And again, there's no definition helps. We have to use words somehow, but the sense of that there's a trinity of who we are: mind, body, and spirit. And one of my teachers once said we have to use metaphors to describe the journey some way. My whole mission in life has been what I call street level spirituality. Okay, how do we take the concepts and put
Mm.
it, and so the image that often arises in me is Dorothy on The Wizard of Oz. Like, when she was in Kansas, it was just her mind. It was a black and white world that she lived in, which is like our Western world. It's just the mind, the mind, the mind. And what is everybody in our Western, many people, most of us in our Western culture, the mind has become the trap, basically, because we're not aware of body and spirit are also part of that trinity of who we are. So Dorothy, the tornado comes, the ego, death, or the awakening, whatever it is, the house goes up, and before it's black and white, the house lands, she opens the door, and all of a sudden there's this technicolor mystery, and she turns to her dog, I don't think this is Kansas anymore. And for me, what you're saying, what I hear in a metaphor is all of a sudden we awaken to mind, body, and spirit can connect with the divine consciousness of God. That God's not out there somewhere, and I got to keep making God happy and grasping and all the intellectual stuff right. It's God is inside of here. And as you say, there's a voice that we all hear in a unique way, the Holy Spirit, the divine, the creator, whatever, in all traditions. that leads and guides us. And you heard that voice. I mean, you landed in the Wizard of Oz, this, you awaken to mind, body, and spirit, and are letting go of just the mind being the sole one. So there's that sense of we get trapped in our mind, and the mind's not a bad thing, as you say, but it becomes the only thing that we identify with, and we get trapped in it. So yeah. Would you, one of the things many would say, as you say, that there's a convergence of truth, universal truths. In the blog that I wrote that accompanies this video, I talked about a concept of interspirituality, that there is a strong belief that, and even in my Catholic church tradition, I've quoted in the blog, that our church says that all traditions, spiritual and religious, have pieces of truth, and we can go and learn from them, kind of like Thomas Merton did and some of the others, not to convert each other to each other's faith traditions. We stay within our lane, our tradition, but I can learn from the Buddhist path. I can learn from, the Protestant path, being a Catholic. I can learn from all kinds of different paths to come back and help it enrich my own belief, my own understanding of God, my own, not only internally, but also as a vessel. How is God calling me as I hear that voice? So that term interspiritual is something that has been intriguing to me, and I write about it. There's a couple of books in my blog that I cite to, because I think there's a concern. It seems with the internet, I mean, you can get a degree and, I can be a minister of the church of, of dollars and cents and get a degree. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, which is good. The Holy Spirit's used the internet, I think, to help us develop a universal church, but there's also a lot of fraud and junk out there that we can get, go down rabbit holes, the angel of light, as we might say. So, and one of those is New Age. As a Christian, that's a buzzword, a scary word for me. As I delve deeper in my own spiritual journey, it's kind of a buzzword. Okay, is this New Age where I'm just studying crystals and I'm the sole source of, the world? Is kind of the Jim, the guy that had everybody drink, blue Kool-Aid and killed themselves. It was like, that would certainly be New Age on steroids. So how would you say Awakenpedia is or isn't New Age? How do we, those of us that want to be careful that we're following the Spirit of God within us and not get deceived, how do you make sure that we're not on the wrong path of, just staring at our belly buttons? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, of course. And it's such an important question, and an important clarification to make. So thank you for bringing that up. Because you're so right in the sense that with the advent of technology and the proliferation of the internet and the voices that are being shared on it, there's a lot of snake oil, as what you could describe it as, that often's kind of wrapped up in this new age nomenclature. And it's coming not from a place of truth, it's coming from the ego, whether they often know it or not. So I share your weariness to be careful not to accept what anyone says as truth. And often there is a correlation with New Ageism and topics that correlate with more egoic behavior than not, in terms of certain types of modalities and things that are being used, crystals, astrology, this, that, starseed, the language can, if you're not careful, it can take you away from the essence. It can bring you further from truth than helping you to come closer. Yeah. Now, I also at the same time want to clarify and emphasize that we all have to be careful not to get caught up in labels and with our own mental positions that we have, regardless of what faith we're coming from. We have to be careful not to just blindly reject the New Age words or at all, simply because we have some predetermined conditioned belief about them. Yeah. It's very important, I sense, to remain open, to be, as Jesus was himself, right, to all beings, all walks of life, and to use that Holy Spirit as the inner voice to help guide you as to say, is this bringing me closer to God or not?
Yeah, yeah.
And that is often an art, and you have to have that, and it's an art that's cultivated with the further you progress on this journey, the more clear and obvious you can say it will become.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so and so I want to just clarify that if and whenever I use the word New Age, and if that's ever described for Awakenpedia, it's just a way of saying a modern, contemporary way of pointing to the same essence that you know Jesus did himself from
Yeah.
thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, New Age for me, just you can interpret it as me saying a new pathway, a
Mm.
new language, often, because it's the same heart of Jesus and what he stood for and pointed to, using different pathways to arrive at the same mountaintop, right? To return us back to the same home of God, our Creator.
Yeah.
But we're we're not living thousands of years ago when Jesus and Buddha did. There's been an evolution that we can't deny that's happened, that we're here thousands of years later. So it's all to say, how can we use what's available to us in a way that's supporting the fundamental essence that all religions, pure religions, stood for?
Mhm.
And as you kind of described in the beginning of this question, and you do see this across the religions sharing same universal truths, you could say.
Mhm.
You know, Christ consciousness is often a word that's used that aligns with the Buddha nature, and they point different philosophies, religions, right? But they support the notion that your true essential self is beyond your form, your body, your mind, and it's realized or accessed when you purify yourself to a point where you no longer identify with those things.
Yeah.
So you rise beyond the mind, and those destinationless destinations that religions use to point to that place of no place
Mm.
is in Christianity referred to as the kingdom of heaven. Buddhism, it's nirvana. And Hinduism, it's moksha. In
Mm.
simulation theory, it's escaping the matrix.
Yeah.
And so,
Exactly. Yeah.
the point again is like, do you have the advanced consciousness to be able to hold it all, to have space for it all without getting caught up in any of the words or labels, to be able to let that intuition guide you,
Yeah.
that truth filter.
Yeah.
And that's what Awakenpedia is, what we stand for in
Sure.
that sense. It's inclusive of all, just as Jesus stood for that. You are the light of the world, he said. He also said, I am the light of the world. So when you look at that, it's to say, I am what you are, and you are what I am.
Mm.
We are one, one being, one love, one, right?
Yeah.
And of course, as children of God, we are not God, but we're not other than God. We're
Yeah.
like the sun ray of the sun that's connected but separate, different, right? But same, but different.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a way to describe it, but
Yeah. That makes good sense.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's what thanks for asking that question to clarify it, and because what we're doing at Awakenpedia is the undoing of all of the mental positions that can keep us stuck in this journey, so that we don't actually come closer to God. We simply think we are, and
Yeah.
that too is an illusion. Right?
Yeah. I use the term God in the box. When I was growing up in my tradition, my Catholic, which I still love. I mean, I'm still love my tradition and continue to practice it and love it. But I wanted to get God in this box. Like, remember as a kid, you had the Jack in the Box and you could stuff him down and then crank it. It's like, that was my image. Yeah, I just want to figure him out more in my mind. And when all of a sudden I realized, no, your mind isn't going to figure out. It's a surrendering, exactly as you referred to, an opening of my heart for the divine to help me awaken to who I am. What you say, a lot of really important points. I think one is I think about Jesus came, I mean, he was seen as like, what the heck is this guy? The Jewish people and all of us, the Gentiles, like, who is this guy? But what he said is, I came not to throw the law away, but to fulfill it. And so I think what I hear you saying is Awakenpedia is not throwing out the true religions and all we've learned over the universal truths, but we bring it into the modern age of how do we, through the internet, through our own lifestyles, how do we integrate that into a way that's real for us? And I love what you referred to, because St. Ignatius says the simple test is this drawing me closer to God or further away? When all of a sudden I think I'm the king of the universe, and it's like, no, this is drawing me away. Or when all of a sudden alcohol becomes, I got to have more and more and more. This isn't drawing me closer to God, it's further away. And I think there's an important piece too, of community, that we don't do this alone. Again, just my own conception of divine flow, again, is that quiet time, spiritual reading, community, and spiritual gifts. That community is so important for mentors, for teachers, for spiritual directors, for a wise council of people. I've shared the story before of, I went on a retreat years ago, a lawyer who's, over working his butt off, raising a family. And I come back from retreat and, honey, I'm going to become an Episcopalian minister. I found a back door into the church, the Catholic Church, as a married, priest. Thank God my wife was smart enough to say, you can go, but I'm not going with you. I think you need to speak with, who at that time was our director of religious ed, who then led me into spiritual direction. So whenever, when I go once a month as a spiritual director to help me stay centered, and I also lean into my wife, my best friend, mentors like you, Cam, to help me, because I don't have the essence of the truth. I can get blindsided, one way or another. And so keeping our eyes focused on, is this drawing me closer to God, but also recognizing we need to surround ourselves with a community of people to keep us on the right track, because God will use people like God did to my wife to say, I'm not going with you. You need to talk to a spiritual director, that kept me on the track, on the right track, and stuff like that. So that's powerful. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the ways, as I've already said, that has been so useful for me, Cam, is the one-on-one mentoring. We, for about 6 months now, I think twice a month, you and I have gotten together on Zoom, and that's been so helpful to me to not only read the offerings and teachings that you and others have, but also to be able to one-on-one with you to help me unpack them as it applies to my life. But also, you've got a pretty amazing event coming up in April, the Global Virtual Retreat. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is our first offering in terms of a virtual retreat, that I feel is going to be a really exciting opportunity for people who are just beginning their journey or have been on it for some time, to help them return to love, and to have a variety of pathways that they can explore and kind of investigate on their own accord, that own truth check for themselves, to say, is this helping me to return to love, to God? Because some pathways work better than others. And so this retreat, I should perhaps first say, is it's a weekend retreat. It's a virtual, so it's all online. It's just going to be through Zoom. We're trying to make it as simple as possible, so that as affordable as possible, so that as many people who are interested and have that call to heal and to come back to love are able to do so.
Sure.
I'll never turn anyone away. If truth will always be before any profit, forever. And Brian, hold me to this. If that's ever not the case for me, please call me out and call out this organization, because this mission is only as valuable as it is pure. So, it's a weekend retreat, and it's about 20 different workshops of all of the various, what I call primary healing modalities, but you could also describe them as awakening modalities, that provide a way in which to help us return to love, a way in which to return to God. And, of course, it is important and necessary to just come into this with an open heart and open mind to say, okay, it is possible for other pathways to exist that can help return us to the same place that we're all traveling.
Mhm.
Um, and so this retreat is exactly that. It's to serve that, to provide people with various ways in which they can get to the summit, various paths they can travel up to the mountaintop. And we have some of the best providers and practitioners in the world that are going to be facilitating these workshops, including yourself for a loving kindness meditation.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Um, these are all people that have been, pre-approved in a sense. We've talked to all of them, interviewed them. We've assessed their purity, their consciousness. We trust them to be true providers that can help facilitate this critical mission of bringing us closer to God, to truth. So yeah, I invite everyone to explore it, to check it out.
So from your website, it's April 12th through the 14th. Is that the dates?
Yeah.
Friday through Sunday. And then if I sign up, if somebody signs up, will the sessions be recorded so that later I can review them if I can't make them all, or do I need to commit a whole weekend to it, or what are your thoughts on the best way for people to experience it?
Yeah, no, it will all be recorded, and the recording of the retreat and every event will be distributed to those who sign up,
Great.
so everyone can have access to the playlist.
Nice.
And it is something that I'd say is timed around like U.S. centric for the U.S. time zones. So like this is a global event, so we will have people from all around the world participating, partners and members alike. But in the event that the timings don't work, that's why you can get the recordings and watch them back. Yeah.
Yeah, and also even if you can attend it, you can also go back and listen to it,
Yeah,
which is kind of
exactly.
cool too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, no, I was just gonna add there that like not every event will interest you, right? Some will perhaps pull at that truth meter more than others.
Sure.
And I encourage those who do sign up to just listen to that inner guidance and attend the ones that you want, and the ones that you don't, it's okay. There's no necessity. This is a kind of like a 48, 72 hours constant Zoom that will be going. We'll have providers coming in, serving their workshop, and
Sure.
you can kind of come in and out as you'd like.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, very cool. One of the things I appreciate that it's on Zoom because, COVID was a horrible experience globally for all of us. But again, God uses, bad things to make good things come. And the fact that now we're really getting used to the universal language of Zoom and these things, which is really powerful. So it's nice that I can be in Sri Lanka or Grand Rapids, Michigan, and participate in this, and that you're offering that in that platform, I think is really important. Where would people find out more about the retreat and or to sign up?
Yeah, so awakenpedia.com. It's all on our website. It's hard to miss. I think there's individual link that I can share if that'd be helpful, but awakenpedia.com, you'll find it right there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just an easy sign up process. And once you sign up, you'll get all the information and everything you need to prepare. And
What I'll do is in the blog that will accompany this, I'll put a direct link, if you can provide that to me, to the virtual retreat to learn more and sign up, but then also to your website, if that makes sense. And that way, if people want to contact you, I mean, that's another question. Let's say people say, well, the retreat, I'm not sure, but I'd like to reach out to Cam and be part of the community, or maybe even do one-on-one mentoring. Would they go through awakenpedia.com to make further contact with you or the community?
yeah. Awakenpedia.com is kind of the hub for everything. So that you can go there to find, to join our Patreon. It's free. That's our teachings platform. And it's
Sure.
also tied to the member forum that we have. So they can hop on that for free there. mentoring is of course something I hold dearly to my heart as that sacred time to share with people. And if people feel that call, I'd love to explore it. I'm always open to chat with people one-on-one. I think it's important that whoever I'm working with or whoever wants to potentially join Awakenpedia as a member feels good about me, what the mission, what we stand for, the vibration of the platform, what we're doing. So I always will invite, you know, free times to chat and just to get to know each other.
Very cool. Yeah. One of the things, and I'm so appreciative, is you invited me to learn more about in our mentoring, the loving kindness meditation, and I swear to God, it has really been transformative for my own meditation practice. So that one-on-one with you has really helped me open up to another way that is speaking to me in my own spiritual life. But also, I love to do is learn these things, and then so we're facilitating the loving kindness circle as part of that to help other people and again, like you say, I love the Hindu proverb, there's many paths up the mountain, but they all lead to the top, basically. And so if we can recognize that God speaks, I often think of the world, the universe as a garden, and, if I go into a garden, I might like the roses, but I like the petunias. It's all the same garden. But I might not like the dandelions. I might just think they're weeds, and I don't want to go, but some people might think dandelions make wonderful tea, and they're drawn to them. So I think the beauty of God is God expresses God's self and meets us where we're at. And so there are going to be different ways, because we're all unique, that God speaks to us individually with that voice, also as a community. And so I appreciate that you're providing a smorgasbord of ways, and that people can kind of taste and see, as Jesus says, taste and see the goodness of the Lord in a way that speaks to each one of us individually. So thank you for offering that. And anything else before we close up that you'd like to offer, or
I want to emphasize for everyone, but particularly, those who are kind of have been grown up in a more siloed faith tradition or pathway, to invite them and to encourage them to see if they're ready and able to open their hearts and minds to call it additional pastures, right? Additional pathways. Often in Course in Miracles, it's referenced that the initial separation from God, call it the fall, with Adam and Eve into this 3D, into the earthly realm. That's the separation, right? That was the birthing of the ego state in that sense. And that everything that we're doing here, every pathway, every modality, every offering is a way of restoring what currently is a divided, separated, split mind back into the wholeness, the oneness of God. And, so it's an important, I guess, the representation of what this retreat stands for and what we're doing is just not to get caught up in names, right? And labels and methodologies and this and that, but to trust that the underlying essence of every workshop in this retreat, every offering, and this stands the same for every event or offering on Awakenpedia in general, as well as every teaching, is to help restore the split mind to come back into oneness with God. To restore that I am essence that we currently, so many of us are currently unaware of or disconnected from. And that's keeping us separate from God and therefore from each other, our brothers. And this retreat is just perhaps a unique way that so many in perhaps your community and other communities that are more traditionally faith-driven aren't yet exposed to or aware of. And there's nothing to lose, there's no harm, no foul. If it doesn't resonate with you, I lost my track. Where was I?
Yeah, we're talking about the fact that, I mean, I think what I hear you saying in is that Awakenpedia isn't to replace your faith tradition or stop you to going to church if that's important to you, a tradition. I
Mm,
mean, I still go to church. I'm still Catholic, but it's a sense of it's that yellow brick road that I learn more and bring it into. So it's not to replace a faith tradition, if there is one that is traditional, that's a root of what we have, which is really important. It's who we are. It's our identity. But it's to make it so that it's not God in a box anymore.
yeah,
It's not the Jack in a box God that I stuff into. Yet we do have to explore new ways. Just like when Jesus came, I mean, it blew a lot of people's minds away. Like, whoa, who is this guy? Seriously? I mean, so much so they put him to death, obviously. But again, the Spirit was able to transcend that into the resurrection and the Holy Spirit. So it is important that we're willing to keep focused on God. I think of that, like, what I hear you saying, you know, again, the image comes Moses in the wandering through the desert. You know, there was the serpent, the staff. Keep your eyes on the staff, on God. You know, just drawing you closer to God. And maybe that's the piece for everyone that is wondering about this is, hey, I can taste it a little bit like Goldilocks and the three bears. You know, I can taste this chair, and something's not right, but something's not is too hard, too soft, but something will click as a God nudge that this is just right. This is a path. This is a God nudge from God that, yeah, it's drawing me closer to God. And that's what I hear you saying, Cam, is taste and see and see if it is a God nudge for you to draw deeper into your own individual connection with God, but also to expand that into however God calls each one of us to be co-creators with God in the
yeah,
universe. Yeah. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. And it's very, very well said. And that's a great way to kind of surmise the point that I was intending to make, which is um, this Awakenpedia is here to serve you, to deepen you in your faith,
Yeah.
to expand while deepening as well, and
Yeah.
to introduce you just to um, just more optionality that will allow you to continue to evolve your own consciousness, all in the service of helping you to return home to
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's
Yeah.
all it is. It's really simple. It's the same mission that Jesus shares as Buddha,
Yeah.
as myself, as the simulation theorists, as people who are trying to get out. Like, we're trying to return to God,
Yeah.
whatever the God is, right? And that's where that your view of boxing God in, it limits you and actually prevents you from returning to God, because as soon as you try to define God, you confine God.
Yeah.
And that's when you get stuck in your path and you stop making progress on this pilgrimage home.
Yeah.
So all of these different events and offerings are tools that could help to shake you out of any quicksand you're in, to help you continue to move on this path home to God.
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
Campbell, thank you so much for having coffee with us and the creator and our
yeah.
audience. May you continue your amazing journey. And may those in our audience just, again, just listen with that heart of love and the Spirit. And may God continue to work in and through all of us to bring about the kingdom of love here on earth as it is in heaven. So thank you very much. God
Yeah.
bless.
Thank you. All right.